And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another episode of Doing the Work, the first show on the Back Home Network covering IU women's basketball. This is our 126th episode, recorded on Wednesday, September 18th, 2024. I'm your host, Jeff Marlow, joined tonight by my co-host, Kathy Amos. And tonight we'll be previewing one of IU's Big Ten opponents and a way-too-early preseason number 20 Nebraska Cornhuskers. But as usual, we'll start this show with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. And Kathy, again, kind of a slow news week, but I will go with this today. IU had their media day, and Terry Morin spoke to the media. If you have that opportunity, you can go catch that on YouTube, or I'm sure at your maybe pull it up at your favorite on the IU website as well. But she did mention a couple things that I thought was interesting. One being that felt like Krzyzewski was kind of slipped. Coming in pretty well, and that was one thing I saw about any specific individual, but that they had felt like they had a really good off season, and that the expectation doesn't change. So our Hoosier Proud banner moment is brought to you by Home Field Apparel, presenting sponsor of the Back Home Network, who includes the Assembly Call, Crimson Cast, X's and Joe's, and now the Dribble Drive. Home Field is constantly releasing new schools or updating their products for schools in their existing line. You are bound to find something for you or anyone in your life that just loves great collegiate gear. Not only do you get quality apparel, but you are supporting an Indiana-based business that has its roots in the Kelly School of Business. Go to homefieldapparel.com and use our promo code HOME23, HOME23, to get 15% off your entire first order. That's promo code HOME23 for 15% off. Once again, the website is homefieldapparel.com. Wear one for the team. Yeah, and Quang, thank you in the Workaholics, because one thing I did leave out, she did mention they worked hard on Lexi Bargesser's shot over the summer, really feel like they've made a lot of change to it, and really felt like it was looking very good. But she did say Lexi's going to have to knock down shots in the game. And I thought that was an important caveat to it. It's one thing to work on it and for it to look good in practice. Now you got to knock down the shots in the game. In news, as we mentioned earlier, Charlie Cream he released a new bracketology today. IU is a 7 seed facing number 10 Stanford in Austin. Texas there will be the host team, and the number 2 seed facing Northern Arizona. The Big Ten had 10 teams in the field. And the Big announced later this afternoon that they will release men's and women's schedules tomorrow at 5 Eastern, 4 Central. But let's throw it over to my co-host and get her thoughts and the Amos angle.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Hey, happy Wednesday out there to everyone. Hope you're staying cool. Again, check local listings. I don't know where it is like the rest of the world, but here in Des Moines, it's still really hot for this time of the year. So just waiting to have some nice fall weather, but enjoying some football in the meantime. But, talking about basketball, hey, we're getting closer. I think Jeff and I just sat down and kind of talked about our schedule leading us up. And I think we're about 5 weeks out from the first game, believe it or not. So exciting that we'll see all of the schedule here tomorrow evening now. The thing is, Jeff, I don't think it's going to tell us a whole lot that we don't know already. If you go out to the website, and most of the non-conference games are probably already out there. Tomorrow's release will focus on conference. We already know home and aways. So now we're just putting kind of dates around it. So we're probably not going to get time or TV channels or anything like that. But at least, for those of us who maybe like to plan some travel to get away from the Iowa snow, we might be able to try to pick a weekend where we don't miss too much Indiana women's basketball. So that is pretty exciting to me. That is coming out tomorrow. The other thing, you mentioned the media day. Yes, I thought it was really exciting to listen to Coach Morin talk a lot about the team and how they're really gelling together. And she really mentioned about how she thought the team is absolutely on pace or even ahead of where she would expect him to be. And if we thought last year's team was a team that really gelled together, that this year's team is just as strong as what she thought last year's team's camaraderie was. Mentioned the 2 transfers coming in and fitting in. And yes, the Lexi Bargesser has really changed and improved her outside shot. Might have been the highlight moment from that whole press conference. So it's about 30 minutes. If you want, I could find it out on YouTube, as Jeff mentioned. So go out there and give that a search and a listen. It was nice to start getting some more concrete news coming out. So, we're getting there, Jeff, not too long. So getting really excited for the season and looking forward to talking about Nebraska tonight.
Yeah, I am too. And then just really quickly looked it up. 41 days. It was on the IU website. 41 days till the first game. So you start marking your calendars down. That first game, by the way, is November 4th versus Brown. That will be in Assembly Hall. So let's talk about the Cornhuskers. Kathy, I'll give everybody the rundown about Coach Williams, and then you kind of pick up on the history a little bit, and we'll go back and forth here. Amy Williams, the head coach of the Nebraska Cornhuskers, has been the head coach since 2016. So if I'm doing my math right, she's actually entering her 10th year, 9th year as the head coach of the Cornhuskers. 307 wins, 208 losses. In her career, she's 114 wins, 99 losses with Nebraska. From that standpoint, or is that her overall with Nebraska is 307? You put together the record.
Yeah, I believe 307 is overall and 114 wins with Nebraska.
That was my math, but I started looking at it. I was like, okay, wait a minute. So yeah, 307 wins overall, 114 with Nebraska. Three NCAA appearances with Nebraska. She was the Big Ten Coach of the Year in 2018. She had previously been at South Dakota, where they won a WNIT championship in 2016, and in the spring and in the winter of 2016 before moving on to Nebraska. And she is a former Nebraska Cornhusker herself. She played back in 1995 to 1998. So that's the background on Coach Amy Williams.
Yep. So in terms of history between the two schools, IU leads that series 12-6. The last time, if we remember, I know I certainly do because I was actually there with my husband. IU won the last game that was in Lincoln. They won that one going away, 91-69. And in fact, I was really on this series, winning the last 8 of 9. Looking a little bit specifically at Nebraska and some of their wins and losses from last year, I think the most notable win for me was at home against Iowa, where they beat them 82-79. So that's, as a reminder, that was the game that Caitlin Clark was expected to beat the record. So there was all kinds of hype, coming into that game around Caitlin Clark and not around the game themselves. And Nebraska just came in and shut her down in the fourth quarter. She didn't score a single point in that fourth quarter. And a couple of ladies on Nebraska's team really stepped up and hit some nice outside shots going into that fourth quarter. And they ended up winning 82-79. So it was nice for them to flip that script, if you will, in that fourth quarter, especially to not make it about Caitlin Clark anymore, but make it about, beating I think Iowa was number 2 or number 4 in the country at the time. So that was definitely for me the notable win. They did have some other close losses and other big losses that were kind of notable. Early on, we started having some questions about Nebraska because they lost to Creighton in November early on at home. And then they went to Ohio State and got beat pretty handily, 80-47. But like I mentioned, they had that Iowa game that, towards the end of the season, they really started putting together and then met Iowa again in that Big Ten championship game. And again, as a reminder for folks, if you've forgotten, they made it to that championship game and took Iowa to overtime in that game and lost 94-89. They made it to the NCAA, won their first game, but lost to Oregon State in the second round, 61-51. So those are just some highlights of how last year turned out for Nebraska.
Well, and I'll go back to that Iowa game in the Big Ten tournament. Realistically, and I'm not trying to say deal with woulda, shoulda, coulda, but they really probably should have won that game. They really were in control of a lot of that game against Iowa. For some reason, and you just get that, Kathy, you get teams that just match up well against you. And there was something about Nebraska last year that was a good matchup for them. But I would think, just kind of get your opinion here about the season last year before we move on to talk about, too much more before we get to this season. But it got to feel like a little bit of a mixed season for Nebraska last year. They were a team that we thought might be a little bit higher during the regular season. They had some ups and downs. They were able to kind of make a little bit of a run toward the end of the season. If I remember, got themselves into a decent seed of the Big Ten tournament, but they weren't a top 4 seed. They weren't a top 5 seed, if I remember right.
No, they were 4th. They finished 4th in the Big Ten last year.
Oh, wow. I was thinking they were like 6th. Okay. So anyway, but
fact check me, but yes.
But anyway, that, that that game with Oregon State, they won their first round game. So I feel you got to feel like they think they made some progress. They made the tournament. They took a step into the second round. So you have to think they think there's something to build off coming into this year with a lot of players back.
Yeah. I'm rethinking myself. I'm double checking as I pull it up here. I think they actually finished fifth. Yeah. Michigan State stuck in there in fourth. So right. Yeah. So they were 11-7 last year overall in the conference. So yeah, fifth in the Big Ten. But yeah, I think we were, if I remember again, that's a long time ago, and I've slept a few nights since then. And I'm getting up there with my memory, but I thought we had them picked around fourth in the league last year. I think we were thinking they could really vie for that fourth position and really compete with Illinois, who I know we'll talk about them next week. I think Michigan State was kind of the surprise sneaking in there last year for us. So yeah, I think there was some bells going off, I think, with that Creighton game in particular, losing that here pretty early on. So
let's talk about some of their stats from last year in terms of their team stats. And then I'm going to turn it over to Kathy to talk about the stats she finds interesting or just she can kind of take us into the returning players here. As Kathy mentioned, 23-12, 11-7 in the Big Ten. They averaged 72.4 points per game. That was 56th in the country. So they could score a little bit. They gave up 64.2. which put them middle of the pack at 164. Their scoring margin at 8.2. On the positive side was 57th. They averaged 70.5 possessions. So this is what tells me where they were efficient, because they only averaged 70.5 possessions, which was 162nd. So, but they scored, 72, which put them at 56th in the country. Their O rating was 35th. Their D rating was 42nd. They shot 42% from the field, 33% from beyond the arc, and 73.5% at the free throw line. They only allowed opponents to shoot 40% from the field and 30% from the three-point line. So they were a good defensive team as well. They turned it over 14.2 times per game, which was 89th. They only forced 14.3, which was 258. So they're not a high volume turnover team in creating turnovers, which they were plus 0.1. But they were an excellent rebounding team. They averaged 40.9 rebounds a game. That was 23rd. They gave up 33 rebounds a game, which was 59th. So they were plus 7.8 on the glass. They moved the ball, shared the ball well, almost 17 assists a game for 30th in the country. Their opponents only got 14 assists per game, and that was 232nd. So again, defensively, they were a real solid team. And Kathy, so you can kind of take a look at some of their stats or take us on into the returning players.
Yeah, I'll just touch a little bit on the stats. I think, the interesting thing is their defense. They're kind of seemed all over the board. They allowed teams only 64 points per game, but they didn't really force any turnovers on that realm. So, I think that's, of course, more important to hold your teams to fewer points. But, if you can even reduce some of those possessions they have, that might help them here as they go into the new season coming up. But, 42nd in the defensive rating is actually pretty good. So I'll be curious to see if they can kind of ratchet that up a little bit. Like you mentioned, the possession was only 70.5%, 70.5 possessions rather, but they were pretty efficient with those possessions, being able to score 72.5 points. So yeah, just reiterating some of the things you had. But yeah, let me talk real quick about the returning players. There's probably two in particular that really highlight the headlines for them. So of course, I think everyone will remember Alexis Markowski. She is a returning player for them. Their big center down low. She averaged last year 29 minutes per game. She averaged a double-double with 15.7 points per game and 10.5 rebounds per game. And she was very efficient down low, shooting 49.7% for her field goals. Then on the opposite side of that, they have a guard, Natalie Potts, coming back. She was the Big Ten Freshman of the Year. She averaged 24.6 minutes, and she was already, as a freshman, averaging 10.2 points per game and 5.5 rebounds per game, shooting 56% field goal. So also very, very impressive from a field goal percentage. And the thing, we might want to watch for her is her defensiveness. I think, from what I had kind of read and heard about her as a freshman, she was pretty quick about picking up the defensive scheme. And so if she's able to make a sophomore leap there, I think that end of the floor is the place she can, even more contribute to what they're needing. Another freshman from last year coming back as a sophomore is Logan Neasley. She was also on the all freshman Big Ten team. She played 17.9 minutes per game at 7 points per game. I put her on here as well as Allison, I think it's Widener. She is a 5'10 redshirt junior guard. She is coming off 2 years of back-to-back knee injuries, but Allison was expected to be quite the contributor as well. And so while, we don't really have great stats on her because of her injuries, if she's really healthy, she's expected to be pretty quick guard. And if Logan Neasley, I think, can take a big jump, I think that will be some good additions to their teams coming back. They already know the system and they're familiar with each other. So I think those two ladies in particular for me are a couple of the wild cards that I have down for Nebraska.
Yeah, I think obviously you start and end the discussion right now with Alexis Markowski because she's a proven commodity. She's a player that has done it over the last 2-3 years in the Big Ten and been a productive performer. Potts is interesting to me because I really like her game, and she only averaged 10 points a game to be Big Ten Freshman of the Year, but she played her role and she really was kind of did a little bit of everything. She defended, she dished it out, she could score it when she had to. I think Potts has the ability to make a really big jump for them, especially considering when we get to the people they lost and one of the big losses that they had. I think she can kind of take up some of that slack. And then you talk about Widener as the wild card. If she can come back to anywhere that looks like a productive player after 2 straight knee injuries, then it's almost like a brand new recruit. It's almost like a transfer coming in because you haven't had her for a couple of years. So,
but better because she already knows the system. So,
right. And but some real good puzzle pieces to start out with here for Amy Williams. They do have one notable transfer coming in. I believe I'm pronouncing this correctly. Alberti Rimdahl, transferring in from Florida. She'll be a senior guard. She's been part of the Danish national team, so she has some international experience. She averaged 7.2 points per game, 1.6 assists per game last year, and shot 34% from 3. She was an SEC all-freshman team selection in 2022. So she's got talent, but it'll be interesting to see how she fits in with the others that are coming back and the incoming freshmen, Kathy.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know a whole lot about her other than, what you talked about, but she definitely comes in with some great experience, I think, as you mentioned, both being on the Danish national team and playing for multiple years with Florida. So, obviously she's got some talent, was expected to do well, making that all freshman team for the SEC back in 2022. So I think this will be an interesting piece for them to fit into their puzzle, as you mentioned, going into. So speaking of other puzzle pieces, then that only leaves kind of the freshmen to fit in. So I think the headliner for their freshman class, they have 3 that I could find, but the headliner is definitely Britt Prince. Britt is a 5'11 guard. She is a Nebraska native coming in as the top 30 recruit, and she's from Omaha. She's more of a point guard, I think, more of a true point guard from what I could find on her. But evidently she can take people off the dribble, off that bounce too. And so that will be interesting. And I immediately, of course, in my brain went to Indiana and how much trouble we have guarding guards with guarding players who are really good at taking people off the bounce, especially quick guards. And so, she is a 5-star. She was back-to-back Nebraska High School Player of the Year. She was also the second all-time Nebraska high school scorer. She scored just under 2,500 points in her career, and she's quick. She was a track star, winning the 400 and the 800 meter in the Nebraska state meet. So, thoughts on Britt Prince, though, Jeff? What are your thoughts?
Other than what I've not seen her, I didn't have time to really kind of try and go watch any film on a high school recruit here. But even though I did a little bit on some of the kids we talked about earlier in the summer, or in the fall here that we were previewing, but again, it sounds like the kind of player that can help them, because they have a glaring hole or weakness at point guard or at guard right now. And especially for us, as you mentioned, that's been our biggest problem, is being able to guard a quick penetrating guard. And so that does give me some cause for some concern when we play them this year.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you got to like her pedigree. I mean, 2,400,
right,
almost 2,500 points, back-to-back high school player of the year. Her pedigree is outstanding.
Yeah, and I want to say that all 4 years of her high school career, she helped lead her team to the Nebraska high school championships. I don't think they won it all 4 years, but I thought that I heard or read somewhere that they made it in all 4 years of her high school career. So she comes from a winning program, right?
Yep.
So, winning, also a winning attitude can go a long way in understanding what it takes to be winner and lead people in winning. I think will help her just coming in as a freshman into this program.
Kathy, just somebody who's more from that area, at least you've been there. I've never been that area. How far is Lincoln from Omaha?
It's not very far. I don't even think it's quite even an hour. Once you get to Omaha, it's a straight shot right on Interstate 80 there. It doesn't take long at all because they actually widen the road for trucks and everything else. And it's a pretty quick trip once you get to Nebraska.
So a big recruiting, so probably a big recruiting win though, to keep her at home.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think this is one I've been hearing. She committed, I think, fairly early to Nebraska, and I think the fans have been really looking forward to her coming in for quite some time. So there's a lot of expectations on her, candidly. So that will be interesting to see how she can handle those. But clearly, if she, is able to be a starter all 4 years, back-to-back high school player of the year, she knows how to win and how to play.
Right. Why don't you take the other two while you're at it?
Yeah, we'll just cover them off real quick. So 2 other recruits, as I mentioned, Amaya Hargrove is a 6'2" guard/forward. She's from Christopher, Illinois, where during her career she averaged, or this might have been her senior year, I wasn't quite clear. Of course, high school stats, not always the clearest in finding, but I think this was her senior year, actually, 28.7 points per game and 10.7 rebounds per game. She was the number 2 recruit overall from coming out of Illinois, and she was a 3-time Illinois Player of the Year. So again, another player coming into the program who has been shown to really be able to play. Then the last piece is getting some more size in there. Petra Bozlan, she's 6'3". She's a forward/center. So getting some more help down low. Hopefully, I'm assuming probably one of the backups to Markowski. She's from Croatia, where she played on the U18 national team 2 times there and on their U16 team once. So again, really good international experience. We're seeing this quite a bit in women's basketball. So she averaged 16.1 points per game, 10 rebounds per game at the U18 Euro basketball tournament. That was in Portugal in August. So again, being able to go up against international competition and put up, averaging a double-double, I think that really bodes well for, I would again expect her to be more of a backup to Markowski from what I can tell.
Yeah, I would too, but it gives you a value. If she can put up those kind of, come close to say with the minutes she's going to get put up, prorate those numbers out, she's going to give them a very solid backup. And those kids who now over the last couple of years, Kat, these kids who have played some international ball, we've seen them really come in and be able to contribute pretty quickly. Obviously, we saw it with Yarden, but there's other schools who have seen it as well. Hargrove, I think you see mostly as a backup here. Now, I could be wrong. I know she's got a lot of stats there, but also that's one of those where what kind of schedule were you playing in high school? I'm not sure where Christopher is, but just exactly what the schedule was. Right. But she was the 3-time, player of the year. Of course, I know sometimes in Illinois, they split it up by class and things like that for their player of the year rankings, unlike here in Indiana where Mr. Basketball, Miss Basketball are one. There's one for the entire state. Okay. But yeah, so you look at their freshmen, and especially with Prince, high profile recruit, stayed home. And then also the others at least can fill a few holes. And as we saw with Sarcastic Mike and the Workaholics here, there was a lot for them to be excited about without the high profile recruit. They they're just adding in for a lot of what they're missing. But I'm going to go right into the players they lost, and I'll start with the first one. Let's talk about her because I think everybody's going to know. Jazz Shelley. Jazz Shelley graduated. She was the 29th pick to the Phoenix Mercury, but Jazz Shelley, basically an all Big Ten level player, averaged 33 minutes a game, 13.4, 4.3 rebounds a game, 5.7 assists per game, 38.5% from the field goal. Jazz Shelley was really, to a certain degree, you can make the argument, as good as Markowski was, Jazz Shelley was the heart and soul of that team the last couple of years. And she leaves big shoes to fill. And that, again, Britt Prince and the others are going to have, even Potts, that's a tough, that's going to be tough. And to a certain degree, the question I have for them was Jazz Shelley such an important piece? Is she Grace Berger? or is she a little more, and I'm not trying to say anything bad, but is she a little more maybe, Allie Patberg or Alexa Golby that we were able to replace just a tad easier that it seemed like we replaced Grace?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the question. I mean, she, if you look at production, 13.4 points. And then the number to me, of course, is the 5.7 assists that stick out to her for me on her, and clearly she's shown production, but that's a lot of minutes to be filling too, 33.2 minutes. So where are all those minutes going to come from? You're looking at Logan Neasley as the all Big Ten, or excuse me, as the all freshman Big Ten team. She had 18 minutes. You have Natalie Potts, another freshman from last year, 24.6 minutes. Alberti from Florida, she definitely knows how to put up some time in there too. And then of course, Britt Prince. So I think it's going to be kind of similar to what we're experienced with Grace Berger, what we'll talk about when we get to Mackenzie Holmes. I don't think it's going to be one person easily jumping in and filling Jazz's shoes per se, or taking all those minutes of 33 minutes. I think it's really going to be split around by committee. I think they have the talent that on paper, at least, to help, again, by committee replace her. The big question always, just like we have for Grace and for Mac, is the leadership. Those are not numbers you see coming up in the stat sheet. Those are numbers that you see with the rest of the team and how that comes together. And so that's my biggest question mark for them too. Who is going to be that leader? Is that going to be Markowski kind of stepping into that role? Because that always to be is much harder than filling minutes and points.
Right. I totally agree. They did lose a couple others. Annika Stewart transferred out to Minnesota. She only averaged 7 minutes a game. And Darian White also was lost to graduation. So, but White played 21 minutes a game and averaged almost 7 points a game. So a decent role player there in White in terms of what she was filling. And she was a starter, her and Shelley are both. So they graduated 2 starters. Now, again, I think you got a lot of pieces to fill there with Prince and the others we've mentioned already, but I'd be very interested to see, again, when you have to replace seniors who've been around for a while, had some success in the league. Let's see how the replacements do.
Right. Yeah. Now, Jeff, I have a question for you. I think one of the things that we've kind of seen with Amy Williams as a coach, especially when I was looking at some of their statistics from their roster from last year, they had a lot of people, they didn't really have per se the same 5 always starting. They did have a core, of course, with Markowski and with Jazz Shelley, but, she really played a lot of her players pretty deep to get them some experience. So I think that only will help them here this year, especially as they're relying on some of the younger people to now start stepping up. They had, just pulling it up here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different players that started at least at 1 game or more. So, that's a lot of experience as well coming back for them when they've only basically lost 2 main starters in that rotation. But how much of a factor do you think that will be for them going into the season, that they have so much experience coming back from last year's team, plus an experienced transfer coming in to help?
I think that helps a lot. I really do. I think and I remember, I always kind of thought Nebraska is a little bit of a deep team anyway, definitely deeper than us, and I hope that'll change a little bit for us this year, but they're not afraid. She's not afraid to play 8, 9, 10 people, at least get minutes for them.
That's right.
They may not get the bulk of the minutes, but she's going to get them minutes. It makes me wonder a little bit, maybe perhaps, Nisley did not, maybe she had to work her way into the rotation a little bit more as a freshman. Potts probably, I think, started quite a few games, but she was probably going to make some of those kids earn their time, and maybe she played matchups a little bit more. Some coaches do, rather than simply going with your straight up 5, they'll play the matchup a little more, or they'll try to create a mismatch situation for themselves by starting a little different lineup. I don't remember all of Nebraska's things last year, so maybe a couple kids missed a game here or there because of an ankle injury.
I know Jazz Shelley missed 1 game, I think, but at least she didn't start 1 game. And I think that she was coming off of an injury. But so looking at the roster again, I got it pulled up now. there were only basically 3 players that started all of their games: Alexis Markowski, Jazz Shelley, and Natalie Potts, and 2 of them are back for them. All of the rest of the players, they had Darian White, who started 23, and she's the only one that left. But I believe everyone else is back. Logan Neasley started 10 games. Kaylin Hawk, 5, Kendall Moriarty, 17, and Maddie Curl started 16. So again, they've got a lot of people that have good experience for them coming back. And to your point, everyone on their team actually averaged double-digit minutes except for one person, Annika Stewart, who only averaged 6 points. So, and she ended up transferring out. So a lot of, I think, experience makes them a very intriguing team for me.
And she in one way or another, she's creating competition for spots. Those kids coming in, even to a certain degree, Britt Prince is going to earn her spot. Now, may not take her long, but there's kids there who've already played. They've played in the Big Ten. They know what it means to compete at that level. So that's, to me, those are all positive things. Now it's just, can you stay healthy? Can you gel the newcomers in, and how easily, knock on wood for them, can you replace somebody like Jazz Shelley?
Yep, absolutely.
Kathy, why don't you take the schedule?
Yeah. So just a little bit that we know about their schedule right now is just mainly, looking at their schedule, they don't have any huge non-conference games that they've really talked about. I believe they are playing, and not that it's a big game per se, but I believe they're playing South Dakota State or South Dakota on a neutral site, which is where Coach Williams used to coach. So that will be an interesting game, I think, from that perspective. But in terms of other big non-conference games, South Dakota, they're playing that at Sanford Pentagon in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. So that would be an interesting venue for them. So otherwise, nothing much that jumps out. They're playing Creighton again. They always do. In Omaha. Yeah. So that will be on there. But otherwise, let's talk a little bit about what we do know about their conference schedule. So their double play is against Iowa. The notable games again at home. And I thought this was interesting. I thought they got kind of some tough games on the road, but at home they have Ohio State, but away they have UCLA, USC, and Indiana all away. So those are what we kind of know from their conference schedule.
So they could be a top 4 team in the Big Ten in terms of talent and all that, but the schedule is not doing them any favors. Having to go to Indiana, which we hope will be pretty decent, and then having to play both USC and UCLA on the road.
Yeah, and Iowa twice. Which
they play Iowa once on the road.
Down, but it's still going to be Iowa, and I'm never going to count them out with the history that they have as well.
No, I agree.
Yep.
So
cool.
But any other final thoughts you have about Nebraska as we wrap up the episode here?
Again, I just, I think I feel pretty high on Nebraska right now. Number 20 in the country might sound maybe a little daunting, but looking into who they have coming back, I just think they have a nice core of people coming back. Coach Williams seems to have really done a nice job, as I've mentioned, getting people with experience and then being able to keep them. They really only had one person transfer out and then lost 2 to graduation. So really a big core coming back. So if this is the year they're going to be making some noise, if there's a year they're going to make some noise, I think it's going to be this year that they're going to have it. To your point though, it becomes, how do they really gel? How do their freshmen in particular make a big leap to their sophomore year? How does Britt, especially with all the pressure coming in on her, which I'm sure there is quite a bit of expectations. How does she gel? So there are definitely some question marks, but this is one I think there are probably less question marks for me than maybe some of the other teams coming into the Big Ten season.
Yeah, and I'm not sure, that I like Amy Williams. I like from what I've seen, I like the way she coaches. I like kind of the things they do. They've always been kind of, at least since I've been paying attention to them, they've always had good, solid players, especially with the Jazz Shelley type. They also have really had an anchor in the middle, whether it's Markowski, there was somebody right before her too.
Yep.
So that they've always kind of been similar to IU. They're gonna defend, maybe not as well as IU has defended over the years, maybe not as quite as up and down as Indiana has played the last couple of years, but they kind of lock in defensively, and they are similar in the way they want to kind of play through their big post player. and then obviously have a guard that they feel like can create stuff. So, and that's been Jazz Shelley. Will that be Britt Prince this year? We'll wait to find out.
Yep, absolutely.
So my final thoughts, about them, I just think that I'm not saying they're going to win the league, but I'm not going to be shocked if they're in the top 4.
Yeah.
Because I think they've got the talent, and especially with what they've got coming in.
I agree. Yeah. It's going to be, like you said, how the schedule kind of shakes out for them. Yep.
And coming up next, our next show is September 25th, 1 week from tonight, when we will spotlight the Illinois Fighting Illini. We will pass along that the Assembly Call guys are doing a show tomorrow night on Thursday. First show they've done in about a month, so if you want to tune into them. If you want to see us do the show live and be a part of the live chat, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@ that's the @ symbol, @Back Home Network. Again, youtube.com/@ Back Home Network. You can be a part of our private community as well. Find out more at assemblycall.substack.com. Special thanks to John Ringer of Rig Design for designing rigdesign.com for designing our logos. Also a big thank you to Bob Thompson for our music that you heard throughout the broadcast. And thank you for listening. We'll be back to talk IU hoops again with you in 1 week. Until then, keep your elbows in, your eyes on the rim, and let's go Hoosiers.
All right, great.
All right.
So have you been able to listen to the media day with Coach Morin yet?
No.
Yeah, definitely give it a listen. I think the other interesting takeaway for me was the fact that, that she was asked, of course, about replacing McKenzie. Not going to be able to replace McKenzie. It's going to be more of a by committee type of thing. But they also asked her about what it was like coaching, the national team, the U18 national team. And does she like to take tidbits or something like that away from other coaches? And she said, absolutely. And we are looking at tweaking some of our offense. She said the last 5 years, we built our offense around McKenzie. We don't have that next year. We're looking at more of a Princeton style and might even play some 5-out next year.
Which would probably be a little, sorry.
And pulling Lily off the block. Yeah. And
playing be a little more of Lily's skill set.
Yeah. Yeah. And she said that she does expect Lily to be a better rim protector this year than she was the last couple of years, definitely learning from McKenzie in that realm too. So definitely give it a listen. It was very exciting to hear that the Lexi Bargesser stuff. She talked a lot about the 2 transfers with Shay and Caroline coming in. She was really high on Lily. So I know it's not there yet, but I wouldn't be surprised to see then Lily, because, we were talking, is it Lily or is it Carolyn Striplin that gets that, 5th starting spot? She was really high on Lily. So, gleaning what you can from a 30-minute press conference.
Yeah, I think you try and go with Lily first because she's going to be back for another year. I've always felt like Lily was now Lily's she can't foul as much. That's the one thing she's got to do a better job. She can't, because with her minutes, she racked up a lot of fouls for the limited minutes she had. But I thought for the limited minutes she had, I thought she was a pretty solid rim protector. I thought her block shot rate per minute, if you were to stretch it out over a 40-minute game, I thought she was pretty solid. So that's interesting. She says that about being a rim protector. But I will give it a listen. I think you talk about the 5-out. I think that plays into Striplin's skill set a little bit more.
Yeah, I do too. And really high on Shay.
Yes,
she said,
that's what I got.
She really is going to be strong defensively, she thinks, for them. And, a big reason why Shay wanted to transfer is that she wanted to come into a program where she knew she wasn't going to be the only gym rat, and that she'd be able to go to the gym and work as much as she wanted to and have actual teammates there to do it with her. And, that was one of the big selling points. I guess Allie was the lead recruiter for her, in the transfer portal. And that was one of the big selling points that Allie was making towards her. So anyway, I now that we're done, and I know we'll talk about Indiana and the team here in a couple of weeks, but while it was kind of fresh on my brain, I thought there was some really good nuggets and tidbits in there. And I was pretty excited about hearing the Princeton offense and the 5-out and stuff. So
yeah, and I hope they keep running. I hope they keep wanting to play a little more play as up tempo as they have been. But I'm really excited. I know she didn't mention them, but I'm telling you, I'm really excited to see what Lene looks like this year.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see what Lene
Yeah,
looks
she
like.
wasn't mentioned hardly at all. I don't remember
Well,
her being mentioned at all. So yeah, I'm intrigued by her too. So I
and
always am.
she might have to fight a little bit more with Shea being there, but but Lene, Jules, I mean, I just really have some high hopes for them to at least step up a little bit more this year and play, and then be ready next year. But I still think Lene, as far as what she could be at IU, has star written all over her. But again, I might just be hopeful thinking and more than the coach in me. But when I watch her
Right.
skill set coaching wise, I just think she has star written all over.
I do too. I think the other interesting thing was the segment on Yarden, and I'll be curious to your take on it. She was very positive about everyone, but when she got asked about Yarden, she was a lot of, well, Yarden knows what she needs to work on. Yarden knows she needs to get stronger defensively. It was a little more of that kind of tone. So I found that interesting. Again, it was a 2-minute clip, maybe 3 minutes.
She's your leader. She's the leader. So you're going to take a little bit different tone with her. That's kind of what that tells me. Or, well, I won't speculate.
That's right. So anyway, just some of the tidbits I had. I'll be curious what your thoughts are. But with that, we should probably let people go about their Wednesday night or whatever they are listening to this later doing. And we'll talk about Indiana here in a couple of weeks. But next week, Illinois.
Illinois next week. Night, everybody.
All right. Good night.